We made this.
Welcome to the Starlight Ballroom. Hey!
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Shipwrecked and Comatose, a Red Dwarf podcast on the We Made This podcast network. My name is Kurt North, and joining me for this special today is Matt Latham. Matt, how are you doing, mate?
I'm good, thank you. How are you, Kurt?
I'm good. It's we're just saying off air. It's a warm day today here. I think they were looking at potentially down south being the hottest day of the weekend of the year. I'm not sure if it's quite reached that level, but with this COVID-19 situation happening and stuff like that, there has been some calls out for Brighton Beach to be closed off and all that type of thing as well recently. So it's all interesting when the weather gets to be really hot at this time, especially being a Friday as well. It must be people just running to the beaches. I don't know if that's something you would ever contemplate, Matt. It's definitely not for me.
I'm not a fan of the beach whatsoever.
We're kindred spirits in that, in that way, mate. So we're here to talk about Red Dwarf, as we always do on Shipwrecked and Comatose. But before we do that, we do want to just mention about the sad passing of Seb Patrick last weekend. Obviously, we're here to talk about the documentary, and there was a graphic that was put on during the show for him. And it's really a real tragedy for him. He obviously ran the reddwarf.co.uk and did a couple of the Twitter feeds there and fan sites, the Ganymede stuff as well. And Matt, you've listened to some of the stuff, and I've been on a few things that he's done in the past as well, haven't you? You're a bit more informed than I am on him. So
yeah, I mean, I'm admittedly not too familiar with the stuff he did with the Red Dwarf fandom, admittedly, but I think it's testament to his kind of love of like geekdom and kind of British web culture, or whatever the term for the culture is. At some point, you probably would have either, if not crossed paths, or at least heard his name. I listened to his Miffling Infinity Office podcast, which was basically just him talking through the episodes of The Office, the US version, and he's also been on a couple of times the Sonic the Comic, the podcast, which I'm also a big fan of, and I think he also he came in to talk about all the football references that Dave and Chris, admittedly, are just complete football Luddites, so they'd bring in their football expert because he was also a very keen fan of Liverpool FC, and also wrote for When Saturday Comes, the website. And I think I believe he was also involved in a football podcast. I'm not sure which one, unfortunately. But and he was also a writer. So he wrote a audio sitcom. The memory escapes me, but I do know that Robert Llewellyn played the narrator on that as well. So,
I vaguely remember that, actually, strangely enough. Yeah, that's something I kind of half remember. Yeah, that's really interesting. And unfortunately, there's been a really good GoFundMe page, which we'll include in the credits as well, for him, because he leaves behind his daughter and wife. And at 37, I mean, I'm 40 years old. Just to be able to really hit home of people of my age. I'm only a couple of years older than him. That these things are a reality, unfortunately. But you can just see how much he was loved in and around, both in Liverpool and obviously wider in the UK as well.
Yeah, definitely. He wrote a article for the 25th anniversary of Bill and Ted, and which got the attention of the screenwriter Ed Solomon, and he also did a very lovely tweet thread of his history with Seb as well, and it was really lovely to see. And again, it's testament just to how passionate and how people seem to just warm to him. So there's just been hundreds and hundreds of people just with good memories of him. And again, I didn't know him personally. I never spoke to him, but I say it's just one of those names that you probably would not have realised. You would have at least come across something he'd written on Den of Geek, or I think he even did the. I believe he actually set up the website for Simon Brew's Film Stories website, the former editor of Den of Geek, and his new venture. So he was pretty much instrumental in setting up that as well. So he's one of these. He's had his finger in so many pies in the British geekdom. So it's a tragic loss.
Yeah, and I think you mentioned in Den of Geek there, that is a particular website I go to quite a bit. So I'm surely that I must have read quite a few of his articles and stuff during there without, as you say, realising that. And the GoFundMe page I was talking about there, just looking at that at the moment, I think the original idea was for to raise up to £10,000. It's currently at 28,911. So, as I say, we'll leave that into the credits. So if anyone does want to give towards that page, then they can do that. And, we obviously people involved there will be much appreciated. And, and his memory will live on. And, all the good work that he's done, and especially for Red Dwarf, which is what we're here to talk about now. So, yeah. So, as I say, so I think we shall move on. And, so let's do that now. And let's talk about the actual documentary. It aired yesterday, Matt. We spoke off air that this almost didn't happen. But what did you make to the documentary as a whole before we get into any of the details about it? And did you watch it on time? Is my pointed question at you today.
It's like you already know the answer, Kurt. And
it almost is, doesn't it?
and you want to put me on the record that I've forgotten about it and had to watch it on Deja Vu. Yeah.
I'm not evil at all. I'm not evil at all.
But, so I did forget. I completely forgot about it until about a minute or 2 minutes past 10, where I was like, crap! And turned over, and I think I only missed the introduction of Lister as a character. But in terms of it as a whole, I'm in two minds, because to me it's pretty much like the old school DVD extras with a bit more money thrown on it, and again it's I'm trying to figure out about who will probably be watching this, and I think a good chunk of the audience who will sit down to watch Dave would probably be the kind of people who've already watched a lot of the DVD extras, and they're very comprehensive. So I found a lot of crossover and a lot of stuff, and quite a lot of the stuff that was covered, particularly at the start and the genesis of this, was stuff that I already knew. So, it wasn't as interesting in that respect as I was hoping it'd be, but there were parts of it that kind of surprised me, and bits that I did find quite interesting. But a lot of the backstory, I think the target audience for this probably would have already known it, and probably wouldn't have learned about it, which was a bit of a shame, really.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it felt like, and I know it's the same company, but it felt like those things. I mean, this is, obviously we're talking in UK, so I apologise for those people in America that might not know this, but it felt like those type of documentaries that you get that are thrown at a series from years ago. So One Foot in the Grave or Only Fools and Horses, where they get comedians who are currently here at the time to talk about that show, and Fawlty Towers, for example, and they just stick a camera in front of them and ask them about it. And there was an element to that for me, and so, I'm going to talk about the music choices and stuff later on, where it was very stock. It was very kind of like, let's put on Blue Monday by New Order because that was released around the time, and then have Nish Kumar come on, who's a well-known comedian in the UK right now, and talk about his love for it. And I felt like, okay, well that's something that you would normally get, as I say, from like an Only Fools and Horses, like retrospective kind of thing, or say if somebody, an actor, dies and they're looking back at their career, it was kind of that kind of feel to it. But at the same time, it also wanted to. It might change as we get into the next two episodes, but it felt like what you said. It was like an introduction, because it kind of runs through. It goes like, these are the characters, these are the character profiles of the people. This is what the people that were in for it. This is what the production was like at the beginning, and then these quickly go over the first 2 and a bit seasons. And within that, it felt a bit, I felt it felt a bit, not jarring, but kind of like it fragmented a little bit. It felt like it didn't know what it wanted to be. You know, and I don't know, and as you say, it was like, there's a lot in here that was like, well, yeah, we know that, I know that, I'm a fan of that. And it felt like very much like, let's open the doors and let people know what Red Dwarf was about from the beginning. I'm not sure if you could do it a different way. I don't know. You probably could, but it just didn't feel like it was, it was literally honed in on. It didn't feel like it was drafted right. It needed a few more drafts down the line.
Yeah, I mean, I say there were bits of it I quite liked, and I think as the episode or this first part was unfolding, there were ideas and things starting to appear in it, which I think should have been the main framing device. For me, the bit that really got interesting was, I think, about 2/3 of the way in, when they suddenly latched onto the fact that this was being filmed and edited during the filming of The Promised Land. And then it cut to them on the set, the 4 actors on the set of Starbug, just basically ripping the piss out of each other. So, and because I think it was at the point in the chronology where of the show where they reached the start of season 3, so they could actually start talking about Robert Llewellyn's involvement. And basically they then had him like pretty much like mocking him, saying, "Oh yeah, I'm still 31 years, I'm still the new guy." And then that's when it started getting interesting. So it seemed, so I'm assuming that the next 2 episodes is going to be completely framed with the four of them sat down, kind of reflecting, like, hopefully in detail, and probably interacting with each other and just basically taking the piss out of each other. And that's the main framing, and that will be the kind of the main frame for the interviews between the 4 of them. It just seemed to take a long time to get to that. Now, I might be wrong. And it might just be very sparse that we see those 4 again. But that was the part I was like, I could probably watch 3 hours of just the 4 of them chatting to each other. Yeah, definitely. And that was the bit that really got interesting into me in terms of the way it was structured. So I'm hoping that was kind of like a very slow build to how the rest of it's going to be structured. And so it was just a long time to get there.
I mean, I wonder if it's like, they've done this documentary as because it's 3 hours long, but taking into account advert breaks, that you're talking 2 hours 10 minutes, 2 hours.
Yeah,
because it's like 40 minutes of an episode, isn't it? Somewhere around there, but. Whether or not they actually, we see that it's been done as a whole and it's being cut up into 3 parts, and then you see overall, when you see the three episodes back to back, that it makes more of a cohesive piece. Mm-hmm. And as you say, you maybe get this, if you do get the Promised Land discussion pretty much right the way through from now on towards the back end of it, then we might be looking at this more with a more objective view. But as I say, it did feel like it was almost like it didn't really know what it wanted to be, and that's the way that I kind of had it. And I agree with you. I think the having the actual talk during the Promised Land recordings was kind of like the most interesting stuff about it. Now, there's elements to this episode this documentary so far where things started to come back to me, because I haven't delved too much into the old Red Dwarf lore, but there is stuff that I've watched that, some of the documentaries, stuff like that. Like when I saw thing pop up when they were talking about Crichton, when they popped up on, what's the episode called? Body Swap. I looked at it and went, oh, right, yes, and it clicked, because I haven't seen it for so long. It was like, right, okay, I actually remember those kind of things now, which was good. But yeah, it did feel to me the same as you. It seemed to take a while to get into the swing of it, and I'm not saying it's been bad, because I enjoyed it, but I don't think it was as good as what I was expecting.
No, agreed. Yeah, but saying that, there were parts and points that kind of jumped out to me and was like, oh, okay. So like it was, and there was like, for example, off the top of my head, it was the original version stuff where they would show you clips of, okay, this is what happened, because the audience wasn't know what to expect, and like they'll show you the first run of things, and there was no interaction with the audience whatsoever, or the audience didn't react at all. So like it was I think one of Lister's and the Holographic Rimmer's first conversations, and like there was
it was when he was basically saying about him being dead, and he says, well, what was it like? And he went, terrible, and nothing. They got nothing. I did enjoy that, and I liked the and to me, if we delve into that a little bit, because it's something that you've just brought up there, which is good, that when they re-edited that, or they came back with it with the death. What you mean, death? His acting style completely changed, which obviously you get from different takes. But then it's like being on holiday with a group of Germans, which is more like a typical classic UK sitcom line. And they've obviously looked back at it and went, well, we're not hitting the audience, and that to me was really interesting.
Yeah, and it seemed to add a bit more characterization to Rimmer as well, and kind of set up that kind of almost contemporary reference comedy that Red Dwarf does, despite being set. The characters being like 100 years in the future from us, mentally. Yeah.
And then what did you think to Kat's entrance then? Because that was it was a bit strange as well, because I think they were saying that the cat, when he came in, that people were kind of baffled by who he was, what he was. And then obviously the broadcast version was when him jumping out of the vents and rolling around and doing his cat moves and, doing his owls and stuff like that. Whereas the original, like, sort of one, which I don't think has been shown either, was just him coming in, and I can see why it got changed. I can see why it got changed, but that was really interesting how they actually, they showed that to say it just wasn't landing. It just wasn't landing with that audience, and the fact that the audience didn't know what they were coming into as well. We knew that, and we knew that anyway. But it was just interesting to see it on screen.
The thing that interested me actually, which I know, because I knew about the electrician strike and stuff, was the concept of them having to just kept rehearsing and getting to know the characters and everything. So I'm assuming that when it comes to try and rewriting things on the spot, as if they did, they got a much better handle on the characters, or a better idea of the characters, than perhaps other sitcoms would have had done at that point. So when they had to go and rewrite Rimmer's line saying, "Oh, it's like going on holiday with a bunch of Germans," it was a lot easier for them to say, "Well, what would Rimmer say at this point?" So, and
that in itself, I mean, yeah, I do remember the electrician strike as well, and I didn't realise it lasted for 8 weeks. I was a bit surprised by that, and I did like the the fact that the sets were kept. The fact that they thought it was going to be the end of it. All the sets would have been destroyed and taken down and stuff, but it was actually stored. And the commissioner, the BBC commissioner up there, Peter Risdale Scott, had kept them, and that's what enabled them to keep going. That element was I thought was well done. The fact that you were getting quite solid information there, and how you work that. But when I was watching that extra rehearsal time, the fact that they were able to gel and they were able to use the almost like theatre. The fact that you are preparing for a play because it's live audience as well. I think that must have done them so much good.
It gave the cast probably a bit more time to prep and get the interaction and the chemistry with each other quite correct as well. Because I mean, like, they made no secret in that the four actors at the start weren't actors. It was a poet, an impressionist, a dancer, and a stand-up comedian.
Yeah.
So,
what did you think to Craig Howell's teeth on that thing? Because they were pretty mangled, weren't they? Did you notice that?
Well, judging by how he looked, I'm pretty sure that was still his baby teeth, if I'm honest. He was tiny. He was so young. He was baby Craig.
Yeah, it was amazing, because I've never clocked on that. But again, that was something that for some reason jumped out at me when I saw him on there, and I was like, do you know what? I don't think I must have seen him on that show at some point. It was almost like, not a flash of like, oh, I remember that. It was more like, oh, hang on a second, there's something in that I think I've seen before, which was good, as I say. And the fact that the teeth, that really kind of threw me. It was like, whoa, I don't, even watching season 1, I don't remember his teeth being like that. I don't know if they got fixed in between, the actual show kicking off or whatever, but I've just never noticed before. But it was startling when I actually saw it on, as you say, how young he was.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't know he was a poet either. So I wonder if there's some on YouTube I can have a look. Same with Norman Lovett. I've not seen any of Norman Lovett's stand up. So
is it again? It was one of those. I don't know. I mean, what's the age difference between me and you? Because I'm 40, so you're a couple of years younger, aren't you?
I'm 34.
34, yeah. So this is probably going back to because when Red Dwarf came out, it was 1987. So I was like 8 years old at that point. So I've just got these. They weren't, as I say, they weren't flashes. They were just like, oh, hang on. Do I remember that? Am I misremembering that? But seeing Norman Lovett was kind of like, oh, hang on a second. I kind of half remember this now. And not necessarily that scene, but, something where I've seen him doing stand-up or, something's come up. I mean, that Lovett, that pound Lovett line is typical Lovett, isn't it? Oh, it was fun. So were you aware of the Alan Rickman thing then, stuff like that? Was that something that you were aware of?
No, that and the Hugh Laurie thing, that threw me, but I don't know whether if Alan Rickman got it, Alan Rickman would not have been Alan Rickman at that point, would he? Or how we know him. I mean, when was Die Hard? Die Hard
was 88, wasn't it? I think it was just after.
Oh, okay then. That's
I don't think Die Hard. Die Hard was 1988, yeah.
Okay, so it was. But that would be at the same time, wouldn't it? So he would have filmed.
87. So he would have filmed.
Oh, okay. So that would have been interesting if there's an alternative world where Alan Rickman did Red Dwarf, and then
Craig Charles did Die Hard.
Well, no,
that wouldn't happen.
Well, no, because I'm assuming this would have been after Alan Rickman did Die Hard.
Oh, for the filming of it.
Yeah, because it was out in '88, you would have filmed it the year before. So, it might have ended up being a weird star vehicle for Alan Rickman, and it probably would not have lasted as long as it had. But then again, would Alan Rickman have the movie career that he inevitably had afterwards?
Yeah, and it's interesting how he wasn't keen on the audience as well. I thought that was telling, that the fact that he just wasn't keen on a live studio audience.
Again, but then again, from the sounds of it, Alan Rickman didn't have the sway to remove the audience. But then was single camera sitcoms without studio audience, which I still think is a very primarily American concept for the majority of the time. Because the only British one I can think of at the moment is The Office and Extras, but I'm sure there's others that I've completely blanked about. But I don't think the idea of an audienceless sitcom was really around at that time, was it either? So
no, it was all standard. Like, I think I mentioned this on a previous podcast. Things like Waiting for God and Last of the Summer Wine and stuff like that. Which I don't know how they would have. I think they were shown to audiences, weren't they? And then laughter track was put on from their reaction.
Yeah, Last of the Summer Wine.
Last Summer Wine. Talking about wine. Okay, so in our alternative dimension, you could have had Alan Rickman as Lister, Hugh Laurie as Rimmer, Kathy Burke as Holly, but who would you have had as Kat? Apart from an ice cream truck, which is currently outside.
I'm not sure, because I don't know. I really can't. I mean,
yeah, because it seems. I mean, just on that, it seems interesting that they kind of skimmed over Cat. It was like Danny John Jules is the cat. It was almost like that was nailed on.
Yeah, I mean, because in terms of, and I don't want to go into the racist stuff, but I think Rob Grant and Doug Naylor, and because of the fact that they, I've got a feeling that they always saw the cat as black.
Yeah.
So because they showed Craig Charles a script because there was a bit worried that Cat would come across as being racist. I'm trying to think of any prominent black comedians or black actors in the late 80s
Lenny Henry.
Yeah, that's the name that come up. And if there's any miscasting that would have ever happened, I've always liked Lenny Henry, and he's pretty much just down the road from where he grew up, the road from where I grew up. So there's that kind of thing to it. But I don't know. I think because Lenny Henry is very much again the comedic actor, but I don't think he'd ever have the physicality or the physical presence that Danny John Jules had, because there was the clip of him with that dance troupe, the name that escapes me, where because I think it was
written down. It was something like, I've got it written down somewhere. I'll have to find it. Carry on, and I'll tell you when I find it.
So he pretty much had his kind of dancing background. So he had the ability to perhaps mimic the physicality of a feline, and immediately as soon as the character comes on screen, Danny John Jules kind of changes his physical presence of stuff. That said, I made a mental note last night to hopefully remember to bring this up. In the Talking Head interviews where they're on their own, I really got to say, I really love the fact that Danny John Jules was wearing a hat, gloves, and pretty much resting on a cane.
Yeah, yeah. That's the epitome of style, isn't it? That was just, and just while I remember when he did the Norman Levitt impression was brilliant as well. It's like, no, Norman, don't kind of thing. It was like brilliant. It was the Second Generation dance group called Second Generation. That's what they were called.
Okay.
So I think having Craig Charles talk about the Manc and the Scouser thing was quite good as well. The fact that there was two Mancs and the letter Scouser be the main lead, which for a Liverpool fan and myself, right at this moment in time, is quite ironic at the moment, which is great. I thought that was nice, a nice little touch. But yeah, I mean, as I say, I mean the Chris Barry said that that Rimmer was these kind of the petrol of the comedy kind of thing. It was interesting that he made that comment, saying that Rimmer was the kind of the main comic side of the show, which I thought was an interesting comment he made there.
Well, because Rimmer is I don't want to say antagonist, but but if you think of Eric Cartman in the South Park ensemble, that his necessity is there because a lot of the craziness or the conflict that comes from the humour between the interconnectivity of the characters comes from a lot of the larger-than-life character that Eric Cartman is. Arguably, you could say Homer Simpson fits that mould because of his lack of awareness and or just tactless nature. Peter Griffin and Stewie Griffin probably also cover that, where you've got that character that's kind of built to be able to bring conflict. It's like how a lot of you could have a comedy where it's just two people together, which is pretty much what Red Dwarf is for the first most of the time, where it's just two mismatched characters coming together. They bring up porridge for one, but the one they didn't bring up, and for me is the best example of this concept of just how you can mine comedy from just two characters that are so different, is Steptoe and Son.
Yeah, they did bring it up. It was mentioned.
Oh, was it? Oh, okay.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, it was after the Odd Couple. I think it was about 2 or 3 lines. One of them did say Steptoe and Son. Okay,
so so you've got so you do have that kind of character that kind of generates that comedy. And and again, I think Derek Trotter is probably the character that you could also class as that. Okay, probably not as dislikable as Rimmer, but you've always got that one character who's a lot more less the straight man than the other one, who's the more comedic one. It's the Eric Morecambe. Yeah, the only wise. Whereas okay, that's not saying that Lister's character is not funny, but in terms of setting up and being the more the opportunity for comedy for the character, Rimmer, at the two of them, Rimmer is probably a lot more the potential there is for the two of them is for Rimmer to set up the gags and for Lister to react. Because I think I think Lister, and they, as soon as the show develops, you got Lister reacting to kind of like the cat and Crichton and highlighting their kind of comedic tendencies as well. So, but at that time, because it was pretty much a two-hander between Chris Barry and Craig Charles, a lot of the heavy lifting to set up the comedy and perhaps the plots as well comes from Rimmer. If the closest thing to an arc plot for the first series is the fact that Rimmer is hiding the holograph discs from Lister. So he's kind of that kind of almost not antagonistic, but kind of thing. So yeah.
It's interesting as well that they didn't. I'm just thinking about this now. I mean, we saw her very briefly on screen that they didn't really mention Kochanski in the, the kind of the build up as well, because they got to Crichton, and I'm wondering if that's something that they're going to pick up on in later episodes, whether or not that may come up in the second or third episode here, because the whole premise of Lister is Kochanski in the early doors, where we've only literally seen her in the drive room very quickly. And I would have thought that they would have brought up the casting of her because of the wrong Claire Grogan kind of thing. I'm surprised they haven't picked that up.
I'll be very surprised if they haven't, but they might be saving it for when they cover Series 7. I mean,
maybe.
Yeah. So I mean, we've got 2 hours. We've got 2 episodes left. I'm be very interested to see how they actually split that up, because I'm assuming they're gonna have to cover the Dave stuff as well. So they might,
especially if it's being made by them as well. You'd have thought that they'll be quite heavily. Because they did reference a few scenes, didn't they? Because the Holly scene where he says it's Monday and you're in a corridor, which is a brilliant line, which is why Mark's not on, because he hasn't seen these ones yet. But that line and the reaction that Holly got there, and that's referencing, I think it was season 12 that potentially. So. It's been a Dave production that you would think that the next 2 episodes are going to heavily feature scenes from those shows.
And so presumably they're probably going to have 3 to 8 for next week, and then the last one will be Back to Earth 10, 11, 12. So because and they're probably saving the Kochanski stuff because like she ends up being a big part of the show, big part of the lore of Red Dwarf. 7, and 8, doesn't she?
Yeah.
I mean, it's going to be interesting to see if they get. Like my jaw dropped when David Ross turned up as a talking head. My jaw dropped, but we'll probably go into that a bit more in a second. But part of me is probably expecting Chloe Annette to appear to have a few lines to say about casting. Claire Grogan turns up. It'll be very interesting if Claire Grogan turns up, but I've got a feeling they're probably saving the Kochanski stuff, and they'll probably mention that. If not, then they are really missing a big lore of that, because I think there's a lot to be discussed and dissected with Kochanski as a character.
Yeah,
particularly in the start of it, and the Chloe Annette era as well.
Yeah, without a doubt, and I think that'll be something to watch out for in the next 2 weeks as well. It was nice to see the Dave Holland Space Cadet having a bit of a listen to that scene. I thought that really is telling that the part that they picked up on was obviously in the first episode, I think. And, the type of joke it was, that they're approaching a storm and blah, blah, blah. But it got better by the afternoon. And I thought that's the type of humour that Red Dwarf is. And I like that they particularly picked out that little scene there. I thought that was a nice little touch.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Yeah. I thought that was pretty cool to watch.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Lobsters and Coconuts, a Red Dwarf podcast. Let's talk about the theme music.
That was brilliant. I love that bit.
Oh yeah, fantastic, wasn't it? So yeah, so what did you think to the Howard Goodall bits then? Because it was really interesting actually. This is particularly, being a musician myself, was a particular of interest to me, and my ears did perk up a little bit when he was talking about the wall of sound and where the microphone was placed and the fact that the bass line on the piano was doubled up a couple of times, and we they actually played the track, and it was like, all right, okay, I'm actually hearing that now, because I never really thought of the production of the song actually before until recently.
Yeah,
and we had a recording, I think, for season 2, which has obviously not come out yet. It'll be coming out after these episodes have aired, obviously, because this is in between season 1 and 2 at the moment. But we came up about the conversation about the theme tune changing, and for some reason it just wasn't in my head that the theme tune changed. You know, even with the early ones, I'd just watch it and not think about the fact that the theme tune was changed later on. But it was interesting the way Howard Goodall arrives at, you know, the fact that he doesn't want to put anything funny in the actual lyrics, and for all his shows he wants it to be more character based and more theme based. And then obviously the musical elements that he was talking through. Well, what did you make to this little bit here? Because I really enjoyed this bit.
Yeah, I mean, as I say, I think inadvertently made it humorous, but I quite like the idea that he said that he wanted to go in and come up thematically the lyrics to the theme tune to match the characters. And I mean, it took me for years and years and years to kind of link the Fun in the Sun lyrics to the characters themselves. But I just found that bit quite interesting that he went for that approach and then still kind of made it humorous. But
yeah. It seems like it's a backward compliment in some ways, isn't it? But I think the fact the engineer who actually worked on the Phil Spector stuff was nice. Was a nice little touch. I like those kind of little stories. You know, this engineer in the studios. I can't remember exactly where the studio was now. Angel Studios, I think it was, in Islington. And the actual lines were, what was the first line? Because I think I haven't written that down. So
yes, because he said he just put dummy He said he put dummy lyrics in. And
I want to taste lobsters and coconuts. Is that what the first one is?
Well, I have the Red Dwarf tongue-tied Wikipedia page, and it actually has the full 4 verses that he went through. So,
right, okay.
So it's, I want to taste lobsters and coconuts. I want to swim nakedly, get quite drunk in several wooden huts. Fun, fun, fun in the sun, sun, sun. And like it's there, I love to have red blotches on my face, make a mess of my nose. I love to peel in a very awkward place. Fun, 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 blah, blah. Then it's green lagoons, palm trees and cockatoos, local rum with mango juice. Get things nicked and ruin all my shoes. Fun, fun, fun in the sun, sun, sun. And tellingly, the final words of this gibberish.
Yeah.
I want to sprawl, shipwrecked and comatose. I want some sand up my bum. Goldfish shoals nibbling at my toes. Fun, fun, fun in the sun, sun, sun. So part of it stayed.
Yeah. That's great. That's a great little addition as well. And thank you for your piece. You were through to the next round of American Idol.
Well, to be fair, if I had more time, I would have rewritten them to thematically be about podcasting. But
yeah. Maybe we'll leave that for next week.
By the end of part 3,
end of part 3, it will be fine.
Yeah.
I like also again going back to the reaction, and this is something that really I always find quite interesting about when you have critical response to something versus public response. And the fact that, you know, they were saying that the critics pretty much canned it, they weren't happy, didn't like it. And then you've got, you know, the audience kind of coming back and really taking it on board and stuff. And that open air TV show, which I've never come across before, it was supposedly it was after a breakfast show on the BBC. And it was kind of like a point of view, if you are familiar with point of view. But that's something I've never come across before. And that was really strange.
That's kind of worrying now, because what you're thinking of is then you've got something that's critically absolutely panned, and then you've got a good chunk of audience that it's really popular with, which is the exact same thing you can say about Mrs. Brown Boys.
Yeah, well, that's what yeah. Well, I mean, take it into the film sphere that a lot of things that got really, really panned was Greatest Showman, and it's one of the biggest films of the last 5-10 years.
Yeah.
So yeah, it really always intrigues me when, you know, that conflict between a critic and popular thing is quite strange. You know, it's it's different. Loads of people are different and view things different ways, and that just intrigued me that there was that response, and and the open air things. The two things that they put in there was more like, it was nice and refreshing to see something different.
Yeah,
and the critical response was it's a Star Trek. They basically used the Star Trek analogy, but pretty much line by line, which Craig Charles reread.
Yeah, the one thing actually about the Star Trek stuff is, and I'm surprised this hasn't, unless this will come up, but there's always a story. There's a story that a talking head that came up on the Red Dwarf night, and I've always remembered it. It's when because Patrick Stewart was the MC for the Red Dwarf night of BBC Two in 19.
Yes,
I think it was. It was before Series 8 started, I think. Or Series 7. It was the lead up to the new series, or it was a celebration or an anniversary or something like that. And there was a fact where I think he started watching the first episode of this British show, and was basically picked up the phone to talk to a producer of Star Trek, thinking, right, let's sue these people. And then immediately there was a joke, there was a comedy, and then he found it funny, and then put the phone down, and then Patrick Stewart then became a lifelong fan of Red Dwarf.
Yeah, I do remember that. I do remember Patrick, because Patrick Stewart, is my favourite Star Trek captain of all time. So, and anything Patrick Stewart's in, I generally lap up. So, but yeah, I do kind of remember that night, but I don't remember when it was. Like, you're probably right. It probably was before season 8, I would have thought. But yeah, that is really interesting.
It was on the same level as well, where you got the kind of key science fiction icons. There was something oddly touching and fitting that the whole thing was narrated by David Tennant. Yeah,
that was an interesting choice in itself, wasn't it? The fact that it's he's a well-known sci-fi person to bring in to do it as well, which it's quite thematically right to have someone like him do it.
I mean, I don't know whether it's been whether David Tennant's publicly said he's a fan of Red Dwarf. I've never seen him speak about it. So it was either he's either got paid for it, but then again, David Tennant being David, because David Tennant, if you ever seen him in interviews, he is basically a massive geek, and he's an admitted geek and stuff, and like he will. I mean, you just have to get him talking about Doctor Who in general. I mean, he'll still talk about it because I think he loves talking about it, and probably watches it.
Well, he's pretty much married into the family of Doctor Who, isn't he? So.
yeah, and I think one of his mates is currently the active Doctor at the moment as well. But I think so. I think I'd be interested. It would be quite interesting to see if there is anything online about David Tennant's views on Red Dwarf. So I don't know whether it's a case of him either getting paid to do it, or someone's asking him if he'd do it, and he go, oh yeah, that'd be a good idea if I did it, or whether he was like, yeah, I'd love to do it, I love Red Dwarf. But it's I'm not too clear on that. So I just don't know whether it's done just because it's the Doctor doing the other BBC sci-fi franchise,
or it could be just the fact that he wanted to do it. I think it's probably a bit of both, isn't it? It's probably what sci-fi franchise can we cross pollinate with people that might not have seen it? Because again, going back to the beginning of what we were saying about this one, it seems like it does a lot to set up what Red Dwarf was. I mean, probably not as much as we're probably egging it here. It's probably not as detailed as what you would expect from a show that's trying to introduce what the characters are, but it still has that. It still has who is the cat, who is Rimmer, who is Lister, and who is Holly, which is my next little bit I wouldn't mind having a quick chat about. And then there's a couple more bits that we might want to touch upon, or something, areas which we might not have spoken about yet. Is, Hattie Hayridge is interviewed on here as well. And they talk about the season 3 change of, going from Norman Levitt, who moved to Scotland, and Hattie getting the job, and the fact they wanted to keep it the monosyllabic kind of idea. And the fact that Hattie, obviously was had a bit of trepidation with it. So that was brought in as well, which is interesting in itself, that they kind of moved into season 3 a little bit, and it links in with Crichton and Holly, really. So I think that they'll be parked as we move into the next couple of episodes. I think this is potentially the only bit of Holly now that we may well get, moving forward. I think it might be more. I mean, next week we'll be looking at special effects from looks of it, and Crichton's makeup. So we might get a bit more, but what did you make to the Holly section?
I mean, I liked it. I mean, I think a lot of. As I said online, I think sometimes the boys from the Dwarf is the four of them, and I think sometimes I think you can easily forget Holly's there, but then you suddenly remember him being there, and he/she ends up being one of the best parts of like the show. I mean, again, I think that documentary does kind of highlights that importance and doesn't forget that bit, because there is that they do comment on the fact that when he appeared in series 12, like Dan John Jules said that Craig said he could have gone for a takeaway, come back, watch Titanic, and the crowd would have still been cheering for when he turned up. So I think they kind of recognise that kind of lineage, and made a key part. But there's always been a part of me that thinks that they always keep forgetting that character's there. But again, I think I know why, because I think by series 6, I think it was series 6 that was the first Hollyless one. I think the idea was that eventually they found that a lot of the exposition that Holly did could just be given to Crichton.
Yeah. That's true.
Yeah, but I do appreciate that they devoted some time to the Hollies.
Yeah, and they obviously on top of the Holly kind of thing, as you say, mentioning that as well. They do talk about Crichton and him trying to find his accent and doing the Mexican Swedish, the Swedish chef and Nippet is mentioned as well.
Yeah, but the interesting bit about that, what I found quite interesting, was that a lot of the information from that was during that bit where the four of them are sat on the set of Starbug. And to me, that was the bit when it started to come really alive. Yeah. And then and then they just started doing the, hello, I am Crichton. And hey, I'm going to help you, Mr. Lister. And they just started laughing at him and stuff. And he goes, yeah, it probably wouldn't have lasted if it was like that. And again, that was one of the better bits of it. And I hope the next 2 episodes have a lot more stuff like that.
Did you manage to see last week or the week before the Comic-Con Red Dwarf panel for the Promised Land?
No, I hadn't.
Because it's very similar to that, because they were talking about, him being the last one to come in and things. And the only problem with that is Danny John Jules wasn't there. So I think, if memory serves me right, it was Ed Bye, or it might have been Doug Naylor. And it had Craig Charles and Chris Barry, and obviously Danny John Jules wasn't there. So it was basically all of them bar Danny John Jules. And the kind of thing there, obviously it was all on YouTube and Zoom and stuff, so it had that kind of collaboration together, and it felt more like what you saw there. And I think, if they spent a full hour just doing that, I think it would be really interesting. But there was times when they went off tangent, though. It was live, so they would go off tangent, they'll be overlapping each other and things, but it was interesting.
There's a great interview. I can't remember if it was for series 11 or series 12, because James Buckley guest stars in an episode, and there's a YouTube video, I think it's about 10-12 minutes long, where James Buckley's interviewing the four of them. Right. Okay. Yeah. The four of them, and it's and they're kind of taking the mick out of him for being 12 or being younger than. But it's just they just seem to have a good close friendship, between the four of them, and I think that kind of thing would just feels like it's natural entertaining just to see them relax and just talk about this thing that they clearly have a passion for. I mean, the fact they're still doing it 32 years down the line, and it seems to be one of those rare casts that seem to look like still being in the same room with each other after that time. So, and I think that the biggest draw of that, I think, is particularly for those conventions as well, is that they like in talking about it with each other, and if we're going to be cynical, I think they know that they can generate interest and probably get people paying to watch them talk about it as well. So they might kind of know need to be kind of come across as friendly, but I do generally think that they have a nice, genuine rapport with each other. So I think that's, and I can't speak for the Comic-Con stuff, but I'm assuming a lot of the entertainment is from a lot of them just
banter. It was the banter. It was bouncing off them, and mocking each other and things like that. That was kind of what the thing was, and it's almost like you'd see this on various things, because remember about how many press outlets that they've got to do in the normal world, that on any TV show or any musicians or whatever, that they have to repeat themselves time and time again. If you're doing press junkets for a film coming out, they'll have to do the same thing time and time and time again. So you get to these phrases, and there's only so much you can say, really. So the fact that Robert Llewellyn was the last one in, that's probably something that they say all the time. You know what I mean? Like, literally, it might get a bit tired of hearing it, but if you're hearing it for the first time, it's really entertaining. So you can see it from that point of view as well. But I wouldn't blame him for that, because that's just the way that media works, really, and it will work for this thing. So looking at that, then I think we've covered pretty much everything I'd want to cover. They talked about Better Than Life. So I think the only thing I'd want, because we've covered this on the podcast, it's not aired yet, which no doubt will come up. The Gwendolyn thing, I could not for the life of me remember on one of the recordings that I did for season 2, when you hear that, about the Gwendolyn thing, because it's on the credits of Androids on the Crichton episode, and I couldn't physically remember why that was poignant. And obviously it's mentioned in this documentary about who Gwendolyn was. So that was nice for me. I was like, oh, right, that's what it was. I couldn't remember for the life of me what that was. So that was nice. And what I did, and I don't think I've not seen this before, the Bermuda shorts and Hawaiian shirts on that real beach. I've never seen that outtake before. And I don't know if it has been public domain. It probably has. But that really threw me. It was like, right, that really brings home what they were going for and what actually came out of it, because obviously Rill's not... I went to Rill when I was 12, 13 years old for a couple of years on a bounce, but that really throws at home just how much they were trying to get Rill to look like the Bahamas or something.
Yeah, I mean, I was quite surprised with that as well, but I think they said that, I think someone commented, it might have been Chris Barry, said that he thought he was watching a black and white programme because of how grey it was. But then then they start showing clips of Series 2, and you've got computer screens. They've got all sorts of different colours on. You look at the bunk. The bunk's got all these kind of different colour posters, and that oddly placed inflatable banana in the back that I always laugh at when I look at. And like they say, they can, finally we can go to a beach. Maybe we'll go to Tenerife or something, and then they go to like the coldest place in Britain.
Yeah, and I think we mentioned on Stasis Leak as well, when you go back in that episode where Rimmer's like jumpsuit is bright yellow. Yeah, it's like the contrast of the grey to the yellow is really outstanding. It's like, whoa, that's bright. But that was obviously the thing to combat. So they quickly go over that. And as I say, a lot of that stuff, and it'd be interesting how we get on over the next couple of episodes, because I'm just conscious that we don't want to touch upon too much of what we want to talk about in the main show. Yeah. Because there's obviously the stuff like the real things, which we went into, which obviously will now be slightly weird listening back to it, because I've seen stuff in this one. But yeah, so that'd be interesting. The question of sport thing as well. In fact, on Oxford Street in Manchester, that they were jumping from Question of Sport to Red Dwarf. It was a very different lighting effect. I thought that was good. And but I don't think there's anything else that I would particularly want to bring up that I can think of. Anyway, is anything that jumps out for you to mention before we call it a day?
The only thing I was going to mention is that the one I just briefly mentioned was that I was generally surprised that they got David Ross in.
Yeah.
That I found was quite interesting, and the fact they got him in, just to say that he couldn't do it, and but then that he still seemed that he's still in a position to be able to say, yeah, I couldn't do it, but still liked what he did. So I was generally surprised to see him, which kind of kiss my fingers crossed that we'll probably get might get Chloe Annette.
Yeah,
to turn up.
Yeah,
so.
I hope we do, because I think Chloe Annette in season 7. I know we're jumping a bit here, but on season 7 she was struggling to find herself, but I actually really like her in season 8. So it's
yeah. Also, I think as well is that you can kind of see that because they've got. Is it Matt McAllister?
Oh yes, from Hollister that plays Hollister. Yeah,
yeah. Is it Matt McAllister? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Because I mean,
Mac McDonald.
Mac McDonald.
Yeah.
For example, I mean, like he only appeared briefly for about 2 different Talking Heads bits, but Mac McDonald showed up as Hollister, which makes me think that we'll definitely probably have a lot more of him when it comes to Series 8.
Yeah.
As well, because he's one of the better things. He's one of the better aspects of that, I think, in terms of.
Tony Hawk's is one of the Talking Heads as well, so I can see if they cover backwards as a sci-fi, if they cover any kind of aspect of sci-fi, that because obviously he was in that episode, wasn't he, Tony Hawk's?
Yeah, he's the one that also basically said that I'm talking backwards. If anyone ever reverses this, like you punch your side house or something.
Yeah, that's the one. I don't know if they'll go into that much depth, but it'd be interesting if they do. Whether or not they just like touch upon that, because obviously he was in Better Than Life as well, wasn't he? But so I think that was his introduction. So yes, it's going to be interesting to see what we have. My final point, or my final thought, is on the music choice. So I'm just going to. This may well become a feature. So we had Blue Monday, New Order, great tune. Peter Gabriel, Sledgehammer. I've played that. It's quite not a difficult song to play on bass, but it's a one that it took a while to get my head around it because it can go a bit all over the place. Pump Up the Volume. The Final Countdown, Europe, which I have actually seen Europe live in the past 5 to 10 years ago. Europe were one of my favourite bands, and Europe are one of those bands which the Final Countdown is both the best and the worst thing that could have happened to them. Because it's the song that they're most renowned for, but they've got a lot better stuff. They're not the best band in the world, I'm not saying they are, but they've got a lot better stuff than that song. But it's as I say, without that song, they wouldn't be known. The Only Way Is Up and Our Friends Electric, Gary Newman. So those are the songs that we're on, and obviously just like to give a feel for the era in which we're in. I think that's what they're aiming for there, weren't they? Okay,
so Kurt, something I've just suddenly thought of. So how many songs was that?
That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
Right. Okay. So let's play a little game. So I'm assuming that we're going to be covering the early to mid 90s first. So which songs do you think they're going to choose to?
90s. I think they've definitely got to have an Oasis in there.
Oh yeah, Wonderwall.
Wonderwall or Don't Look Back in Anger.
Okay, what I'm going to do, I'm going to write these down.
Okay. So we're going for Oasis. Maybe some Blur.
I'm thinking Common People over Blur, actually.
Common People, Pulp. Yeah, Pulp. Okay. So we're going for 6 songs here, aren't we?
Yes.
Spice Girls.
Wannabe.
Yeah. Let's see. So they've gone for a pop. They went for like a alternative. They've gone for like a dance track.
Because I think they'll probably they'll definitely play Wannabe when they say, and then in 94, 95, the next Series 7 never happened. Jump to 97 and then dun 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 1997. So
Brits 90s. I'm going to go for something like a bit out there, which is a bit American, so I don't know if they'll do it or not. But No Doubt or Gwen Stefani.
No Doubt. Don't Speak.
Yeah.
I mean, I wanted to say It Smells Like Teen Spirit, but I don't think that would fit. But it is one of the defining songs. I'm going to put it.
Yeah. What's the Time Slides? What Time Slides has him when he goes back to the bar, doesn't he?
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's a thematic addition there. Yeah. So okay. So we've got pop, we've got some rock, we've got some alternative, we've got some indie. How many people have we got now?
We got 5. So we've got Oasis, Pulp, Spice Girls, No Doubt, Nirvana. We've got one more.
So we're covering seasons 3 to 6, aren't we?
Yeah. I thought if we're going early 90s, we'd probably go for kind of rave and dance.
Yeah.
And, naughty, very naughty.
Okay. Yeah.
Like the Shaman, Ebenezer Good. Because I think we've gone for the mid-90s for the majority of the time for here. But they are very much.
Let's see what rolls next week.
Yeah, and this is when they still stick on series 3 for half the episode, and we got about 4 80s tunes. But so it'll be interesting to see if we get that right next week.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I'm looking forward to that now. So you've got it written down. Do not delete them. Do not take them off. They've been recorded.
Yeah.
So we'll leave them on there. We'll see where we are next week, and we'll talk about that. So next week we're looking at Crichton's makeup and special effects. Apparently, Starbug. Obviously, the amount of model making and things like that. I am so hoping that Rimmer's scene when he gets fired out of Starbug is on there. It's one of my favourite things of all time. When you can clearly see it's an action man, he gets fired out of the thing.
Yeah.
I'm hoping that will work. Any final thoughts before we call it a day, Matt?
No, I mean, it was just guessing the songs, and that's it, I think. And that I hope we have more of the 4 of them.
Yes. Yeah, hopefully. Right, okay, so you are coming back next week, and the week after we're going to cover all 3 episodes of this special. So it's going to be an interesting ride over the next couple of weeks. But until then, whenever this comes out, hopefully it'll be in the next day or so. But where can people find you online, Matt, and what you're up to?
Yeah, they can find me online under my other podcast on the We Made This Network. The main one I do is Pick a Disc, which you can find us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram with the username Pick a Disc. Very imaginative, Matthew. Thank you. And the newest podcast that at the time of speaking and recording has just released an introduction episode, and I've got a feeling this will probably air before the first proper episode airs. So Ask Us About Loom is a podcast where myself and Tony Black, our boss in charge of everything, talk about point-and-click adventure games, and we'll be covering for the early 90s, we're going to be going for the Secret Monkey Island. So I've been very excited in the build to work on that one. So if you're ever interested in that, please give it a listen, because I am so excited to finally have that out in the world.
Are you going to cover that game where you've got the tarantula crawling up the leg?
Bronson 2.
Yeah.
Maybe one day.
That'd be great. That'd be great. You're playing one of those games again? I love them. So you can find me on Twitter at rmuldrake. It's RMULDRAKE. We're currently in the middle of the XCast Fight the Future Minute podcast, which is following the X-Files film from 1998, minute by minute. Now, currently, as we speak, we're in the late 90s, so we're getting very, very close to the end of the run now. At time of recording, we're looking at Mulder is freeing Scully from the alien base and the alien ship. So we're getting towards the back end of that at the moment. I'm currently in the process of starting to record season 3 of The Time Is Now, which is a Millennium podcast, and you can find that on at The Time Is Now pod. And then obviously this one's my main focus at the moment. So the Red Dwarf pod, which is Shipwrecked and Comatose, or we might well rename it for the next couple of episodes to Lobsters and Coconuts.
I'm going to be making the case that we just change the whole podcast to Lobsters and Coconuts.
Yeah, I think something needs to happen. We need a petition.
Yeah.
And we'll see how we get on. But yeah, so those are the places you can best find me. So remember, everyone, until next time, which will be next week, and as soon as possible after recording, we will see what happens on the next documentary episode, part 2. But until next time, remember...
Dun, 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 dun.
Elsewhere on We Made This. The Movie Palace.
Yeah, I mean, that's the common consensus. It's a great film. It's one of Hitchcock's best. But what makes it so good?
Well, first of all, it's just such a good, well-crafted film. And the more you look at it, the more you see everything that's in this film is just so well constructed. And it has so many layers. You can just watch it on a story level, and it's just a very effective film. But when you start getting into the depth of the characters, especially Marion and Norman and Norman's relationship with his mother. It gets very, very complex and it gets very psychological.
I'm in a band podcast.
We should talk about that because when we have our CDs made, we get 1,000 CDs, don't we?
Yeah.
Which costs approximately £1,000. And then we went to Germany and the Netherlands, and every single time we went, oh, where's your vinyl? Where's your vinyl? Do you guys have any vinyl? No, we don't. So then we have a load of vinyl made, right? And then they don't bloody buy it the next time we go.
Yeah, it's mad, isn't it?
Pull or pass?
And then within the first 20 seconds, nipples on costumes, backsides and crotches. I mean, that is a huge start. That's a bold start.
I just want you to know that I hope you're always remembered for that line. The thing is, we know that the reason the tone changed so much was that Warner Brothers and everybody else connected to like promotion needed Batman to be more toyetic.
Check out all of these shows and more on the We Made This podcast network.
Shipwrecked and Comatose, a Red Dwarf podcast, was created and produced by Mark Adams and Kurt North. You can find us on Twitter at Red Dwarf Pod, and we are part of the We Made This podcast network, which can be found online at wemadethispod.com or on Twitter at We Made This Pod.